I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and good morning, Bowling Green. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my my wonderful co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yeah, and together,
indescribable co-host.
Yeah, there we go.
Apparently,
right. And together, Rebecca and I are about to create a new hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about it in the ways that affects you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your family, and the trees and the fish and the amphipods and the birds and pretty much everybody and everything, because, like it or not, we are all wrapped up together on this wonderful planet called Earth. And this past week, so we have a great show lined up for you today. We're going to just chat for another 10 minutes or so. And if you'd like to join in on that chat, give us a call at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. And after we're done chatting, we're going to have an update from our good friend from Roam Free Nation, Stephany Seay. Is going to tell us about what's going on with the bison in Yellowstone, because if you'll recall, this time last year there was just the wholesale slaughter going on. So I wanted to check in and see how they're doing this year. Then we hear from our wonderful, wonderful patrons and sponsors. And then Rebecca, what will you be talking to us about?
in honor of National Meat Day, the first day of National Meat Week, I'm going to talk about carnivores. They'll eat ya.
National Meat Week. I have to say I was not familiar with that.
Me neither.
Okay.
Delightful surprise.
And then after we hear from Rebecca, we will hear from all around the world, because we have ecological news from around the world. And as I say, at any time, give us a call, 877-909-1007. Okay, so I'm looking out the studio window here, and as has been the case most of the past week, there I see a fair bit of fog out there. And the fog kind of started on Tuesday, and you may not know this, but essentially the continent of North America was foggy. This fog bank was literally the largest fog bank ever recorded, and it stretched all the way from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico. It literally covered a third of the country. Over 100 million people had intense fog this past week. And the reason this fog, interestingly, is I discovered there's two kinds of fogs. There's called advection, which is what this was, and versus radiation fog. Now, it's not radioactive fog. It's like heat radiation. But what was going on, interestingly enough, was there was a storm. Well, there was a high pressure system over the Atlantic, right? And that kind of made a big bulge. And then there was really super hot, wet air coming up off the Gulf of Mexico. And so that started heading north. And this this bulge of high pressure kept it over the middle of the country. And so this warm, wet air from the Gulf of Mexico flowed all the way from Texas to Canada, carrying tons of water, and that flowed over all the snow, all the cold air that had come from our brief 2-week winter cold snap there, which is now definitely over. And so that is what caused this intense fog. And it was really kind of amazing to see the maps, NASA's pictures of where the fog was. As I said, it was the largest fog bank ever recorded. And in fact, it was a record on Tuesday, and then Wednesday it was another record, and then on Thursday it was another record. So it was like the fog kept getting bigger and bigger. But that was, as I say, advective fog. The other kind of fog is normal, what they call radiation fog, and that just happens when it's clear and outside in the spring and the fall when the ground is cool. And as the ground cools, then the fog kind of comes out of it. As the air gets too cold to hold the moisture, it just turns into little droplets of actual water in the air. That's fog.
I'm imagining that advective must be the opposite of convective, or no?
They're not really related.
Okay.
Yeah, no. It's just you can actually make advective fog yourself by just taking something out of the freezer and put it, like when it's warm out and moist, humid, put it on your table and you'll see stuff coming off of it. That's kind of making advective fog.
All right.
But one thing that I noticed about this, this ties in with something I wanted to talk about. There's a YouTube personality. Her name is Sabine, and she's a physicist. And normally I don't care for her at all. She does some interesting science presentations, and she does it with humor. She's got a huge YouTube following. But she's super pro-nuclear, so normally I kind of don't like what she says. But this past week, she started talking about climate change. And she's actually been one of these people that hasn't been terribly worried about climate change. She's been kind of like, the numbers are going up a little bit, the graph's going up, but it's going to be 100 years before we have to worry about it. She changed her tune this past week.
Oh my.
Yeah, because we're having all these super records. This fog was one of the symptoms of the climate change, because it's not normal in January to have 40, 50 degree Gulf of Mexico air coming up over Ohio. But the reason she changed her tune is because the scientists have been using all these climate models, and what the IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change, does is it takes all these hundreds of different models and mixes them together to come up with what they think is the best estimate of what's going to happen with the climate. And what she talked about in her presentation this week that I did not know was that there's a subset of these models that more accurately reflect the process that we call here, the one that we always refer to, a positive feedback loop. Yes.
Okay.
Specifically, the positive feedback loop in terms of clouds and how reflective clouds are. And so there's this about 10% of the models are showing that the climate isn't going to increase 1 or 2 degrees centigrade. It's going to increase 6 to 8 degrees centigrade.
And even 1 or 2 was really not good news.
No, 1 or 2, like 1 to 2 right in there, that's the borderline that we're going to be able to maintain Western civilization with. 6 to 8, it's just like, no, it's like complete collapse, billions of people dying. And what she pointed out that I did not know is that they've been throwing out the ones showing 6 to 8 increases, because they're like, those are just outliers. That can't possibly be right. And so they did this test where most climate models don't predict like weather, like short-term weather. they're aiming for like what's going to happen over the next 100 years or so. But they tested the accuracy of all the models by using them to predict weather for like a month or 2 months to see which models more accurately model the weather. And it turns out that these models that show the huge like 6 to 8 degree increase, they're actually better at predicting what actually happens than the models they've been using.
Ooh.
So it's entirely possible that the 90% of models that show 1 or 2 degrees, that those are wrong. And the models showing 6 to 8 degrees, those may be the correct models that they've been tossing out of their calculations. And so this basically scared her into finally thinking, global warming has to be a serious thing. And so it was nice to hear, but it just, as more and more evidence mounts, as we got more and more experience, it's clearer and clearer. And most people, we like to point out that, the vast majority of people, 70 to 80% in all the polls, believe in global warming and understand that it's a problem. But the politicians and the people controlling the politicians, the billionaires, use the remaining 20% of people as like shields against the rest of us.
Yep.
And that's what has to stop. And we do have some good news on that front in our ecological news segment. Some actions are finally being taken that can give us hope that we are going to pull out of this before the plane crashes.
That'd be special.
Yeah, it's like that old. Remember that old Bugs Bunny cartoon where they're in the bomber that's heading straight down and like the wings tear off and luckily, like just a few inches from the ground, the plane runs out of gas, so it doesn't crash.
Oh, of course.
Just hangs there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's what we're kind of hoping we're going to be able to do, right?
Yeah.
We just stop putting carbon in the air, and the whole disaster, which is accelerating towards us, will just stop and actually not happen.
That'd be lovely.
So, knocking on some wood. All right. Well, now it's time. We're going to go to our interview with Stephany. And longtime listeners to the show know that she's been with us from the beginning. We started looking at the Yellowstone bison way back in 2019, and it's been quite a saga. The numbers of bison in Yellowstone Park admits they can have up to 10,000. That's what the capacity of the park is. But what's been happening over the years is the number in the herd keeps growing, slowly growing. And then what happened last year was they just went insane and just wiped out a huge chunk of the herd. So let's get an update on what's happening this year from Stephany.
Hello and welcome back to For a Green Future. Would you please tell us your name and who you're with?
My name's Stephany Seay, and I'm the co-founder of Realm Free Nation.
Great. And called you for an update on what's happening with the Yellowstone bison herd.
Well, relative to this time last year, it is really, really quiet. We've had a very slow start to winter, and there's not a whole lot of snow, and so there's been very little migration. There's been none into the Gardner Basin, where so much killing took place last year. There has been some into the Hebgen Basin, and there's been, I think 13 buffalo have been taken over the course of the past month and a half, and all from the central herd, the most imperiled population. And, once they get shot at, they tend to leave Montana, and so there's currently no buffalo in Montana.
Yeah, well, I guess that's kind of a relief, right?
It is a relief. I mean, we would love to see hunters get completely skunked this year. We would love to see the buffalo too, but we don't what happens to them whenever they do leave the park.
Right, and this would be a good year for the hunters to come home empty-handed after what happened last year.
Right.
So the final.
But if there is any migration at all, it's going to be a killing frenzy because of how long it's been, how slow migration has taken to start.
Mm-hmm. We were looking at the final count of how many bison got killed last year, both in terms of the hunt and in terms of dying from the harsh winter or predation or other causes. About what percentage of the herd last year ended up getting dying off?
Oh, it was at least 25%.
So a herd can't
Way too many.
Yeah, a herd can't really sustain losing a quarter of its members like year after year after year, can it?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And and once again this year at the Interagency Bison Management Plan meeting, Yellowstone National Park cautioned hunters to not hunt in West Yellowstone because the central herd, the imperiled central herd, exclusively migrates into the Hebgen Basin. They also migrate into the Gardner Basin, so they're doubly impacted by management actions. And so because they're the only ones that migrate into the Hebgen Basin, Yellowstone, knowing how, bad they're doing, is asking hunters to not hunt there. And already at least 13 have been killed. They just don't care.
Yeah, so they're definitely, sounds like they're valuing the hunt over the bison.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Now, there's some things in the works in terms of policy, right? I mean, there was a comment period. They are considering at least establishing endangered status for the Yellowstone bison.
Well, there's that happening, but we've been told that we won't hear about a decision until 2026. That's too long, for the condition these buffalo are in. And then we also have another policy in place. Yellowstone National Park is coming up with their own bison management plan that only affects the interior of Yellowstone, which is kind of ridiculous because so much happens outside the park. Mm-hmm. But so they've just completed a draft EIS. I guess it was a couple months ago now, and so we'll be waiting to hear back from them on that within the next year.
Yeah, 2026. If you're losing a quarter of the herd every year, and in another, that would be 3 years since they started. Yeah, that's a lot of mortality, and that would actually.
I was just going to say, a lot of species end up going extinct before they ever get listed because the process takes so long.
So that's part of the 99% success rate is they don't count the ones that die off before they get the listing.
Right.
That's too bad. So people, I think, are increasingly going to Yellowstone to see the bison, right? People love to see the wolves, but they're very rare, and I think that increasingly the bison are like one of the most popular things in the whole park.
Definitely are. Yes, they definitely are.
Your organization, you were hoping to get out there in the field some this year. I know that. Have you managed to get out there?
We haven't been yet. We've just kind of been waiting to see what's going to happen with migration. But if, more time goes by, we're chomping at the bit to go be with some buffalo. So we may just end up going to a recon until, migration does begin.
Mm-hmm. Now, here in Ohio, we had, this is a sort of almost a non-winter. We had no snow at all. Temperatures in the 50s, almost 60s all through December and the first part of January. Then we had 2 weeks of winter. And now, the snow is all gone again. And, today it was raining all day long and almost 40 degrees. Is it possible there may not, quote, be like, quote, a winter, unquote, up there in Yellowstone that would force the bison out of the park?
It's so hard to say because, like you, Western Montana has had similar conditions. Winter didn't come for a long time. It was quite warm. And then about 2 weeks ago, we got some really frigid negative temperatures. And then we had some snow move in. And now, in the past few days, it's been in the upper 30s, upper 40s. So a couple of things could happen. Maybe, at least into the Gardner Basin, buffalo wouldn't feel the need to migrate. But when you have snow and then it gets warm in the daytime and that snow melts a little bit and then it freezes at night, it becomes like concrete. So if those conditions occur, the buffalo can't crater through that to get through to the grass beneath the snow. And that could cause a big problem. So hopefully that's not going to happen, because a lot of buffalo would also die from winter kill. But we just don't know, I mean, we're dealing with wild nature. It's just all going to depend on conditions. But you can almost guarantee that in the spring, in the Hebgen Basin, the central herd will migrate over into West Yellowstone to head towards Horse Butte and surrounding lands during calving season.
I was going
to say, hopefully, if hunters get skunked throughout the winter, that they won't take advantage of calving season. But I wouldn't put it past them.
I was going to ask about calving. I mean, we know that the winter, there was slaughter. Was there much success in the calving? Did a lot of baby bison get born to maybe hopefully make up some of those numbers?
There actually were a lot of baby buffalo born. I mean, it didn't make up for everything, but they entered this winter at about 4,600 strong, which last winter was 6,000.
All right. Well, at least that is something wonderful about the bison, isn't it? I mean, they can come, or they have many times come back.
Yeah, to a degree, yeah.
To a degree, right. So, if people are concerned to want to, follow what's going on, how would you recommend they do that?
You can find us on the web at roamfreenation.org. We have lots of information and take action items. And if you are moved to, you can help support our work. And we're also on Facebook, and you can find us there and share our posts and like our page and help spread the word.
Okay, now you guys actually are connected with some other groups, aren't you, that are working to sort of restore the prairie health?
Well, we have strong allies with our friends at Prairie Protection Colorado, and their main focus is protecting prairie dogs who have a similar to the buffalo. They occupy less than 1% of their historic range, of this historic homelands, and they're getting annihilated all over the place, left and right, poisoned, and their houses destroyed, their burrows destroyed. And Prairie Protection Colorado does a lot of great work raising awareness, advocating for the prairie dogs, and relocating them when necessary and when possible. Even though that's not the ideal situation, they're saving prairie dog lives.
Are there prairie dogs in Yellowstone?
They aren't. They pretty much start on the east side of the Rockies. We have little ground squirrels that look like miniature prairie dogs, but the thrust of their habitat is on the east side of the Rockies.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's happening to the bison, you mentioned it's also happening to the prairie dogs. It's kind of happening all up and down the food chain, isn't it? I mean,
it really is. I mean, you hear experts say 200 species go extinct every single day. This industrial civilization is not stopping itself. I mean, it will eventually, just by default, that this is not sustainable. It's not going to last. But how many species are going to be taken with it?
Well, let's hope we figure things out. I mean, that's the thrust of this show, for a green future, is that
right.
We're hoping that people do figure it out and stop in time before society collapses. I mean, there's a lot of advantages to society. It does seem like we're kind of bent on tossing it aside, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of one of the reasons I think that it's so important to pay attention to the bison is, in a lot of ways, the success or failure of the bison, we are tied to that, because of just a few weeks ago we were talking about keystone species and how if you remove that keystone, the whole ecosystem collapses. And bison are definitely one of those keystones, aren't they?
They are, and so are prairie dogs. And prairie grasslands habitats are some of the most endangered habitats in the world, mainly in large part due to their absence and the presence of agriculture.
Interestingly,
if we had most of our agriculture, like 90% of our agriculture, isn't going to feed us, it's going to feed the animals that we eat. And so, if we just ate a little less meat, we could we could get by with a lot less farmland.
Right.
What do you think about people going to Yellowstone? Do you think that's a good thing for people to do for the bison, or do you think it's just sort of? I mean, we see pictures of people harassing them and getting tossed around by them sometimes. But what's your opinion on just should people visit Yellowstone?
I mean, obviously there's too many people that visit Yellowstone today, but I do feel that people who are drawn to Yellowstone, who love the buffalo, who love wolves and grizzly bears, and should go, but just have some respect and restraint and be mindful that you're in their home. You know what I mean? I mean, it would be a shame to say, no, don't go there, but the animals need a break. I mean, I guess one of the best things about Yellowstone is that most of the tourists who go there never leave the roads.
Uh-huh.
So most of the interior of the park, outside, a mile off the roads, there's no humans. There's rarely humans. So the animals can find some shelter, but, a lot of the habitat goes through the river valleys, and that's where so many animals like to be. But, if people could just have some respect and show some restraint. It is not a petting zoo, These are wild animals. It's a magnificent place, and I would definitely encourage people to see the buffalo, to get to know them,
Right.
But just with respect.
Okay. So go, but stay on the roads and keep your distance.
Yeah.
All right. Good advice. All right. Well, believe it or not, that's just about 15 minutes.
Okay.
Anything you want to add?
No, I mean, just folks who are listening, just look us up, roamfreenation.org. And again, we're on Facebook. Just follow our work. And, things are definitely not going to stay this quiet for much longer, I don't believe. But we'll see how it goes. But in any way, we'll keep you posted on what is happening.
All right. Well, thanks for the update, Stephany.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and thank you folks for listening. And now we get to be even more thankful, even more gratitude. Now we hear from our sponsors.
For a Green Future is also brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They also restore wildlife habitats and lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. There are several ways to get a hold of them and find out what's happening. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. Another is to visit their website, www.wcparks.org. The website again is www.wcparks.org. They are also available on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and many others. Just search for WC Parks. That's the Wood County Park District, and we're very grateful for their support.
And we are also very grateful for the support of our patrons. And patrons are, I would say, morally superior people who've gone to patreon.com. And there they found our Patreon page for A Green Future. They looked at our different levels of monthly membership, and they chose a level that matched their budget. And it helps us out immensely. In fact, we couldn't do this show without the support of our patrons and advertisers. And so this is January, so it's time to be doing the books. And, I'm doing the books for A Green Future LLC for 2023. And we could really use some more patrons. So please, if you're someone who's been considering becoming a patron, please go to patreon.com this week and sign up. And we can thank you profusely every week the way we thank our current patrons. Okay, Rebecca, Now it's time for you to tell us a little bit about something. What are we talking about?
Alrighty, so yeah, it is the beginning of National Meat Week, which I had no idea was a thing. It's America. Every week is National Meat Week, you know. But
Good point.
yeah, so I wanted to talk about carnivores a little bit. The word carnivore comes from the words carnis, meaning meat or flesh, and vorare, meaning devour. So it's a very dramatic kind of a word. Carnivores are animals or plants whose food and energy requirements derive from the consumption of animal tissue, mostly muscle fat and soft tissue, like, I don't know, organs and stuff, through hunting and or scavenging. So, yeah, the scavengers are technically also carnivores. They were classified as that. There's also something called order Carnivora, but all carnivora are not carnivores, and all carnivores are not carnivora, it turns out. Felids, big cats, small cats, they're all obligate or hyper carnivores, what is called. Ursids, not so much. Polar bears gotta eat all meat all the time. Ursids, other bears, they eat other stuff mostly. You know, I read someplace you should think of bears as basically a cow that might eat you. Because really, mostly they just eat a little bit of meat sometimes, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then there are also carnivores which are not in order Carnivora, like cetaceans. Those are whales and dolphins and whatnot, and they are related to plant-eating hooved mammals in the order Artiodactyl. So
like hippos, right?
Yeah, like them. Anything, yeah. Plant food, mammals, whatever. Also, according to the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, I looked this up because I wanted to look at the ecological implications of carnivores, which are many and varied, but some of them are when carnivores are depleted by human activity, animals lower on the food chain then proliferate. And this results in deforestation and disease transmission, which makes sense. They're all clumped up together. They're all spreading and sharing diseases, you know. They're not scattering out of fear of carnivores like they should. They also disperse prey populations, which encourages plant growth and reduces diseases. Interesting fun fact, 64% of terrestrial carnivores, land carnivores, are threatened with extinction.
Oh.
So that's a problem.
Yeah. That is not good because, as we've talked about before, you pull the carnivores out of the ecosystems and they tend to collapse.
Yep.
Because the next lower down critters eat everything.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thanks for that report on carnivores, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
And if that has prompted you folks to want to make any comment, like if you'd like to comment on National Meat Week, like how are you celebrating National Meat Week? I guess that would be a question we could ask. Give us a call at 877-909-1007. Okay, so now for the next 25 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about ecological news. And our first story, this actually broke way back in July of 2022, an article in Scientific American that I didn't catch it then, but I think it's an important enough story to share with you folks. Plus, it's a little interesting. Isopods in the ocean. Isopods, the closest thing we've got on land are the little roly-poly bugs that you find under rocks and things. They've known for, forever that isopods hang out in seaweed forests, like kelp forests and places like that. And what they just discovered in 2022, after, they had no clue for this in the hundreds of years we've been studying the ocean, isopods fertilize seaweed the same way that bees fertilize flowers.
My heavens, I had no idea.
No, nobody did.
Yeah.
But some biologists finally just spent some time.
So it doesn't seem odd that I, living here in Northwest Ohio, would not have stumbled upon this fact.
Well, true. I mean,
the scientists didn't know.
Yeah, it took the scientists a
That's
long
probably
time.
why, yeah.
So basically what happens is these isopods run around on the algae, and they live off of smaller algae that tries to grow on top of the big, seaweed type seaweed forest type algae. All the time, the like single-celled algae are trying to cover them. But so these isopods keep the algae clean by eating the little tiny algae cells. And they also, in that process, get coated in the sex cells of the algae plants, the big algae plants, and carry the sperm around and fertilize them. And they did experiments where they put different tanks and different isopods, and they found that it improves the fertilization rate by 20 times. So,
Right.
yeah, so it's just, I wanted to include that one just to remind us all that, we have all this wonderful ecological data, but we are still discovering very basic stuff that, we should have known for, 1,000 years or 100 years ago. But, all right. So next, on to our next story. This one's mostly in Africa, but it's actually all over the world. And that it turns out that sand thieves are a thing. There is a gigantic global sand black market.
Well, what? People need sandboxes, and you got to make concrete with it. They need glass.
Right? Yep,
okay.
exactly. Cement, glass, semiconductors, silicon. So you need some nice sand for that. But the global economy uses 50 billion tons of sand every year. And just for as an example, China, of course, like most things, China uses the most. And there was a study done from 2011 to 2013. China used 6.6 gigatons of sand, which is more than the United States used. The United States, for the entire 20th century, only used 4.5 gigatons. So China's eaten up these beaches. And the black market, or the combination of the black market and the legal sand dealers, the estimates are between 100 billion and 800 billion a year. And it's actually very difficult to pin the number down because so much of it, in fact, it's now estimated that more than half the world global sand market is illegal sand, which basically these thieves, they just rent a bunch of backhoes and a bunch of dump trucks. They drive to the nearest beach and they just start digging. And it's in fact in Morocco, where sand exporting is one of their major exports, more than half again of their sand exports are illegal, and it's having terrible ecological consequences because as you may guess, if you dig the beach up, anything that tries to live on the beach, from birds to turtles laying their eggs, all that literally just gets destroyed. So, and it's a growing problem, and it turns out that we are projected to have a sand crisis, that the easily mineable sand on the planet is the demand for it's increasing so fast. The United Nations is predicting by 2050 we're going to run out of sand, which seems bizarre.
Also, that sounds like the name of like a movie or a novel, The Sand Thieves. Like,
yes.
It something sort of dramatic and mysterious, possibly.
Right. Well, it turns out that a lot of these sand thieves are actually groups that start out as drug, but then they, people keep getting arrested for dealing with drugs, and it's complicated, and
Nobody likes that.
No, but with the sand thing, you just go steal the sand and then you sell it to the legitimate, quote unquote, legitimate business community, and nobody's thinking about arresting people for sand.
Right.
I mean, you don't look at nobody in the penitentiary right now in any U.S. prison is there because of, what are you in for? Sand thief, sand
Which is
theft.
good, because that's not going to impress the other inmates.
No. So, all right, on to our next story. And this is one of those good climate stories that I teased in the first part of the show. Title, this is a press release by Greenpeace International on January 18th of this year. Title, Groups Win Climate Court Case Against Norwegian State. And basically there was a group, Young Friends of the Earth in Norway, and they took the Norwegian government to court because they approved 3 oil and gas fields, but they did not do any basically environmental impact of what the impact of putting all the carbon from those oil fields into the atmosphere is going to do. And the court agreed with them, and so now Norway cannot develop those oil fields. So it's an amazing victory because, you know, the government of Norway, as we've been documenting in the past couple of weeks, has been just like kind of losing it in terms of environmental stuff. They've been trying to go the other way. So now the courts in Norway are forcing them to do the right thing. And it's a great victory in Oslo District Court. So it's still got to go to the Supreme Court. I'm sure it'll get appealed by the oil companies. But they have to immediately stop development, which is great news for us because that Norwegian oil would hurt us because that's how global warming works. It's global. Okay, another fun story. On January 30th from Renew Economy, that's January 28th for Renew Economy. Turns out nuclear power industry in 2023 actually shrank. Yes, hooray.
Bravo.
Yay.
Good riddance to bad rubbish, as they say.
Yeah, the titled Nuclear Goes Backwards Again as Wind and Solar Enjoy Another Year of Record Growth. And we actually reported on the record growth last year. There's over 500 gigawatts of renewables got it installed around the world. And it turns out that the numbers for nuclear actually shrank by 1.7 gigawatts. There were 10 nuclear plant closures. And so the nuclear, and that's about average because these nuke plants are wearing out. They're breaking down because they're ancient. You know, many of them are 40, 50, some are going on 60 years old. And as they get shut down or retired, the industry would have to put up 10 new nuke plants a year just to stay even. And they cannot, because it's just so incredibly expensive and difficult to build a nuke plant that they basically, the nuclear industry shrank. And let's see here. So yeah, I was very happy to see that. And there's a related story here in Ohio. The Perry nuclear plant has applied for one of these license extensions so that it can operate for another, I forget how many years they're asking for. I think they're asking for 20 years, which would be an 80-year-old nuke plant, which is, you know, not really what you want on the shores of Lake Erie. But there's going to be a public hearing on January 30th that's organized by our friends at Beyond Nuclear and Ohio Free Nuclear Network. They are going to be pleading their case before an NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission panel, basically laying out why the NRC should deny Perry's request for a continued operating license. And they have a whole bunch of points they're going to make. One of the main points they're going to make is that nuclear is now so expensive that it's actually going to hurt Ohioans economically to keep this old, expensive nuke plant running instead of buying more wind and solar power.
Yes, it is.
So this is, when we say at the start of the show, we're talking about your wealth and health and happiness. Here's a direct wealth one, because if they get the extension, it's going to cost you more money in your electric bill. And if Beyond Nuclear and Ohio Nuke Free Nation win, then that will actually save you money. So let's hope they win. Okay, let's see how we're doing. Not bad.
There's interesting stuff going on in Guyana, apparently, about oil.
Oh, really? Go ahead. What's happening over there? Where are you getting this information?
Am I getting it? Reuters.
Oh, Reuters. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but okay. Apparently, I think it was only around 2017, 2019 that they discovered that Guyana has accessible oil.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, okay. This is June 8th. Why are they telling us about June 8th? Well, it's news to me anyway. Yeah, a Guyana appellate court judge temporarily stayed a lower court's order requiring ExxonMobil and partners in offshore oil production to provide an unlimited guarantee to cover potential oil spills. The state lifts a cloud over oil production at the nation's first offshore oil platform.
All right,
So I'm guessing we like that cloud.
we want
it back.
We want the cloud. So,
Yeah.
so in terms of the environment, the court made the wrong decision.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, whenever there's an oil spill, the damages are actually kind of incalculable, because a lot of the damage to our ecosystems never has a dollar figure attached to it. You know, I mean, you can measure, okay, fishermen lost 100% of their catch, and so that would be worth, you know, so many billions of dollars. But nobody's putting a price on, let's say, the algae in the kelp forest that are cleaning the water, you know, but still get killed by the oil slick. So I like the idea of unlimited damages for
I mean, they're
oil
gonna. You could
companies,
be
you know?
Costa Rica, Guyana. You know, you got a
Yeah.
rainforest there. You could make money off that. A little tours with a canopy and a little rope bridges and stuff.
All right. Well, that's
You're throwing some away here.
sad to hear. But it goes towards our next story, which this is from NASA, directly from NASA on January 11th this year, 2024. NASA analysis confirms 2023 the hottest on record. So there was little doubt, especially the second half of the year, as all the chart indicators just leapt off the page, and just broke new grounds. But it is now official. They crunched the numbers, and 2023 was by far the hottest year ever recorded. The temperature was 2.1 degrees Fahrenheit above the average, and they used the 1951 to 1980 temperatures as the baseline. And it was about 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial temperatures, early 1800s temperatures. And they're blaming a big part of it on El Nino, but the thing about that is El Nino is going to have, historically, it has a bigger impact in the second half of winter. So in other words, we're still not at the peak El Nino effect, even though we've had only 2 weeks of winter and 50-degree days in January, which suggests that we may not get any more winter this year, that 2 weeks may have been it. So yeah. So at the start of this winter, people were telling me that the Farmer's Almanac was predicting a really harsh winter with lots of snow and cold, and I was like, no. I actually, if you go back and listen to our old episodes, I was like, no, it's El Nino year, everything's jumping off the charts. It's not going to be a big, cold, long winter. And
you know who else is from Guyana?
Who?
Eddie Grant, the Electric Avenue guy. Remember that?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Rock down to that one. Yeah. I thought he was South African.
Well, electric is good. We want to electrify the economy because it's much more efficient than this oil and gas stuff.
We're going to rock down to the solar and wind Electric
Powered
Avenue.
Electric Avenue. Yes, there we go.
That's the idea.
That's what we want.
Yes,
right?
definitely.
So, so that was our story about NASA. And now we go to back to Ohio. And this is an interesting story. The Ohio Supreme Court is forcing the lower court to reopen a case where there was injection wells. And injection wells basically are a very primitive technology. Basically, you take chemical wastes and you just stick them in the ground. You drill a big hole, kind of like an oil well, but instead of pulling stuff out, you put nasty stuff down into the ground. And, as a waste, quote unquote, disposal technology, it just on principle, it sucks, because what often happens is that these wastes find some way to bubble back up, and they get into wells and they contaminate groundwater. All the stuff they swear the injection wells won't do when they go to, try to get permits to create them, they all end up doing it, so it's just a terrible, terrible technology. But one of the side effects of injection wells turns out that if you inject into some rock that has fault lines that you didn't know about it, you actually create earthquakes.
Oy vey.
Yeah. And so there were a couple of injection wells over in the western part of Ohio that, they got their permits and they were going merrily along. And somebody noticed that every time they injected more, this was fracking wastes they were injecting. Every time they injected more fracking waste into the ground, they had earthquakes. And they'd never had earthquakes in that part of Ohio before. I mean, never. And so it was very clear that there was this company, which is AWMS is the name of the company. It's owned by Avalon Holdings. And they got their license in 2011. They started pumping stuff in 2013. And in 2014, the state of Ohio, people kept complaining about their houses getting shook and, things falling off of shelves and foundations getting cracked. That kind of stuff bothers people for some reason.
Yeah.
And so the state of Ohio shut them down. So what they did, what Avalon Holdings did, is they appealed to state court and they said, look, this is a taking. We invested all this money into these injection wells and now you're telling us we can't use them. So you got to pay us all the money we've lost by not being able to continue injecting earthquake water into the ground. And the way I kind of describe it is it's kind of like if you had a serial killer and he's suing the victim's family because he damaged his machete. It's
Yeah,
like,
I hate it when that happens.
yeah,
Inconsiderate people
it's just crazy.
with
And
their bone density.
yeah, I know, damaging murder weapons. It's like, come on. So what happened is that they appealed this, and the lower court said, no, that's ridiculous. We are not taking anything from you. We are preventing you from destroying, houses and stuff. But they were unhappy, and so they've appealed to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court sent it back down once already, and the lower court basically repeated itself and said, no, this is ridiculous. You don't get any taking money for destroying people's property. But this past week, the Supreme Court sent it back down again and said, listen, lower court, you have to continue to take this company's takings things seriously. And so I guess they're going to have to look at it again. It's just an example of how terrible a turn the Ohio Supreme Court has taken. I mean, they really are just flying in the face of reality with some of their rulings now. So that's pretty much it. Rebecca, I see you're looking at something. Did you find it interesting?
I found something from the AP from 2020. According
okay.
to the AP, a natural resource watchdog group alleges in a new report that Guyana may have lost as much as $55 billion in a potential revenue by poorly negotiating a deal with ExxonMobil to pump reserves. There's the 2016 deal giving Guyana 52% of the revenue. The oil pumped is a massive ripoff, blah, blah, blah. Country with inadequate schools, a declining sugar industry, crumbling sea defenses that cannot protect it from rising sea levels deserves a better deal, the group says. Yeah, I think they do.
Well, actually, globally speaking, there is a direct connection between fossil fuel extraction being a country's major source of revenue and poverty.
Also, much of the area is subject to a border dispute with Venezuela, so it's oil starting more wars. Yay.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a direct correlation. The more a country is dependent on oil extraction, the poorer it is. So that's, you'd think it would be the other way around because there's all this oil money.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening is a very tiny, corrupt sliver of that country ends up with all the oil revenue, and the vast majority, 99% plus, end up poorer than they were because the extraction actually destroys the natural economy that supports people. So like in Nigeria, for example, the Niger Delta was incredibly rich in terms of people were harvesting, tons and tons of fish every year. And then the oil extraction came in and wiped out the fishery. Now, the revenue from the oil went to the wealthiest people who lived in the capital, but the people who actually lived in the Delta, now they didn't get the money and they couldn't fish. And so
I remember those 3 months I stayed in Tampico, Mexico in 1989. I used to go to the beach in Ciudad Madero a lot on the Gulf Coast because you had to, like, Tampico's the old port town, you know?
right.
But yeah, the beach town, the Ciudad Madero is mostly built around the oil refinery by Pemex, which is
Right.
the state oil company. So they did nationalize the oil at least, but yeah. But like the thing was, you had to take these little mini buses that you caught downtown in the marketplace in Tampico to get to the beach, and about halfway there, a bunch of short little Pemex petroleros, oil workers would get on, and there was no place for them to sit at that point, so they all had to stand up. They had to raise their arms to grab the bar, just to stabilize themselves. And guess where you were sitting? Right in front of a petrolero's sweaty armpit. It was delightful.
Okay.
It's a real cultural experience, man.
Oh,
Seriously.
there you go. Well, so, you know, that's it for the ecological news. It again, that brings us to the question we should all be thinking all the time, which is, how do we get to that green future? And so it's our choices to continue using fossil fuels, to continue driving a gas guzzling car that are fueling the economy that is, diving our plane towards the ground at, thousands of miles per hour. So get yourself an electric car, get some solar panels on your house, compost, do everything you can, because the government's not doing it for you at this point. All right, that's it for our show. Thank you so much for listening. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
I don't want no oil a-spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!